In order to understand how much fat we should be recommending for endurance athletes, it's really important that we understand how fat is used and oxidized during endurance exercise. And I've put 3 articles up on the Blackboard site here for you on this particular topic. The first one is a fairly large study by Venables in which they tested or measured fat oxidation among 300 individuals and looked to see what factors influence the rates of fat oxidation and certainly the exercise intensity at which maximal fat oxidation occurred. And they really found large individual variation between individuals. They found a few fairly consistent differences in that women tended to be better able to oxidize fat compared with men, and they certainly found the exercise intensity influenced the rate of fat oxidation. The next study is a review paper which looks at a number of studies that have investigated fat oxidation during exercise, and they look in a little bit more depth at the different factors that can influence fat oxidation. So even things like the mode of exercise, certainly the intensity of exercise, gender of individuals, and also what we eat before and during exercise can influence how much fat we're oxidizing during exercise. So fat oxidation during exercise can be highly variable, influenced by a number of factors, and we really need to think about this when we're recommending fat intake amounts for endurance athletes. The final study is a more recent study which has looked at fat oxidation rates across a number of different athletes from a number of different sports. So this study used over 1,000 athletes in which they looked at fat oxidation rates during an incremental exercise test. And I think the big thing that came out of this study for me was the huge individual variation in fat oxidation rates. There was a really marked difference between individuals, even within the different sports that were actually examined in this particular study. Certainly the variation between individuals seemed to be much more than the variation in average values between sports. So what I took away from this was that fat oxidation is highly variable among individuals, and I suspect that our requirements for fat for different endurance athletes may be quite variable. So some athletes might respond really well to a high-fat diet, some athletes might not respond very well at all to a high-fat diet, depending on their capacity to oxidize fat during exercise. So I think this is a really important thing to consider when making recommendations for fat intake for endurance athletes.